Alright, I recorded this once and it ended up going up Tits Creek for some reason I still am not 100% sure of, so I'm recording this for the third time. This is going to be a part 2 of the last video about Warhammer 40,000 roleplay. I want to talk more about abilities, gear, and a little bit about enemies as well, so let's talk about this stuff. I got to play a game last Wednesday. I learned a bit about it through that one shot. Let's talk about Psychers first. How does it work? What do you do? What can you do? Good questions. I still have no idea. From what I understand, in order to get the Psyker abilities, I'm going to leave that in, you need to meet all the key words of the ability. There are 9 schools of Psychers: Universal, Minor Psychic, Biomancy, Divination, Pyromancy, Telekinesis, Telepathy, Maleficarum, and Runes of Battle. Most of these abilities have 2 key words, a few only have 1. Psychic is always going to be one of them. In the case of the Universal and Minor Psychic powers, they all only have 1. And that's Psychic. Some Minor Psychic powers also have Kinetic. One has Auditory. And doesn't have Psychic. But I'll figure that out at another time, to be honest. Now, here's a thing I don't really understand. How do you get those keywords? I think you can buy them with a certain amount of experience points, depending on the keyword you want. It's in the advanced chapter, and it's a lot, honestly. Let's go over what each school essentially is. Biomancy is honestly one of my favorites. It affects biological life, changing the shape, the mass, or even healing or regenerating things. Divination is essentially future sight. It's got a few other abilities, but most of them give yourself or allies advantages while gives enemies disadvantages. Some last a general set of time, like saying next roll, while some are more specific, like saying 12 hours. Now we start getting into abilities with more keywords than just Psychic. For example, the Pyromancy school. It has all of its abilities have the keyword Fire as well. This school is about blasting with fire, covering yourself in flame to be a defense, and also cooking heads from the inside out. No joke. This Mind Fire ability is kind of freaky. Telekinesis has the kinetic keywords and psychic keyword. The abilities aren't just moving things. Well, they are, but they aren't. They also push bullets to go faster and hit harder. They can stop some rounds from entering your area, and even make gravity more powerful. Telepathy is also more than reading minds. They've got the telepathy and psychic keywords. One only has psychic though, but we'll get into that. Most of the abilities are about getting into the brain and doing shit. Pulling information out, talking with people, erasing memories, or even that one I mentioned earlier with only 1 keyword. Screaming into their brains. Now we get into the one I have trouble pronouncing. Maleficarum? I'm going to assume that's right. This discipline is about chaos. All of them have the chaos keyword on top of the psychic one. There only have 5 abilities in the core book, but I assume there are more in others. But all of the abilities I would really count into other schools. Just maybe alter them slightly. Because we've got Dark Flame, which essentially works like Molten Beam, but it's unholy fire instead of holy fire. Then there's Possession, which looks like it should be a telepathy ability. I don't know, it's a weird school. The final school of magic is the Runes of Battle, which are an Eldari school of magic. Only space elves can learn it, which essentially makes it the worst. No, it's not. It's actually pretty good. They're essentially two abilities in one with a XY sort of thing going on. For example, Conceal Reveal is one ability which you can learn, which makes either stealth easier for you or harder for those in a cone area ahead of you. Each of these abilities is pretty much like that, where it does two things at once. Now, I mentioned the Chaos a little bit earlier. Welcome to the Chaos! There's quite a few rules about Chaos itself. Corruption, for example, being one, which can come from using Chaos abilities, but it can also come from radiation and other things as well. Mutations can come from corruption, but they are usually natural birth things, and in the Imperium will normally get you executed. If you're a Psyker, you'll be put under torturous tests, and then maybe be allowed to join a chapter to become a sanctioned Psyker or a librarian. Some mutations can actually be pretty handy, for example, the Horn, Claw, Fang, or Spine ones, because they can basically be used as weapons when you're disarmed. Some corruptions grant other things, but usually these things would make you abhuman, and thus unlikely to gain access into the Imperial military, though some aberrations are usable in the Imperium, and they can give you some pretty cool things like turtle shells, extra speed, or gills. Of course, these sort of aberrations come with a downside. The desire to cannibalize. A lot. And it makes them grow stronger. Now, let's talk about gear. Every single item has its own keyword, though admittedly the book says it's fairly optional to actually follow those keywords. But weapons require you to use certain skills to utilize them, as do Psyker abilities. Melee weapons use the weapon skills, firearms use ballistic skills, while Psyker uses Psychic Mastery skill. Welcome to the Chaos! Armor boosts your resistance more than defense. What's resistance? Essentially, it lets you ignore certain damage. Your toughness plus your armor and a bit lets you ignore so much damage and keep on walking and take no wounds from it. While defense lets you dodge out of the way of shots fired. It isn't really affected by armor. Well, the weapons are fun as hell though. I know, a heresy there. My players went with a Flamer, a Meltagun, and a Thunderhammer for the Space Marine. Yes, he was a Salamander for those that know. And the Eldari Ranger took the Ranger Long Rifle, which he used as a sniper, a Shuriken pistol, and a Witchblade, which he never used. When my players can roll a dozen dice, it's hella fun. Now, let's talk a little bit about enemies. This is going to be the shortest bit here. Now, I assume there are more in other books, but the core book only has like 6 types of threats, as they call them. And each one is dropped into 3 or 4 categories of threat level. Troops being your average grunts, elites being your, more powerful enemies, and adversaries are essentially your bosses. Now, the types of enemies there are Imperial enemies, because sometimes the Imperium fights itself, heretical, demonic, orc, Eldari, and Genestealer. Each one has its own abilities and themes and ways of going about, though if I went into all of it, I would be here all day. So, now that I've done all that, I don't know, like, share, do whatever the hell you want. That's completely your choice. I gotta learn a weeb game called Teenagers from Outer Space, so shove off.